Welcome back to Diary of a Speed Reader. Today's book is The Ethics of Identity by Kwame Appiah, and I'm giving it 5 stars. Kwame Appiah should be added to every poli-sci philosophy class in university. It's so fascinating because he has a sub 4 rating, and a lot of people are trying to say, oh, he's a neoliberalist and trying to latch on with these big $5 words. But the fact is, he basically takes a bazooka and shoots a hole through John Stuart Mill's and everyone else that came before him. He's basically saying this whole concept of liberty's got a big problem in light of structuralism. And in that regard, it needs to be said. 5 stars. I'm going to tell you 3 things that I found profound and go through a little bit of this in more detail. But first, February has been Black History Month and it is coming to a close, but that doesn't mean that you can't add a little diversity to your bookshelf. If you've been trying to figure out what to read, well, take a look at my list. I'm totally excited to recommend any of the books that I reviewed this month. Now, let's get into why this book is so interesting and very controversial too, nonetheless. The first thing has to do whether or not the laws are fair and just and there's any kind of liberty, period, in a world where there's structuralism. Now, what do I mean by that? See, here's the thing. We all have rights and our choices are our free will. Kind of, except in a world where the whole structure forces upon you some kind of identity, right? Like if you're born and you are a certain gender, race, or what have you, and the world just thinks about you a certain way, then you've got to actually overcome all of that before we can even talk about the idea that you're having some kind of choice. And then even after you've overcome that, the fact is other people still see you the way they see you. So what's that all about with free choice? Once we layer all of that together, then thinking about what the law means in light of that, fascinating question. So let's say, for example, you got a daughter and she's great at football. Okay, but she may want to be a professional football player. Let's say she's actually built for it, has a talent for it, for whatever. And she may not even care what everybody else thinks, but maybe the world thinks that she shouldn't be spending her time that way. Well, she's actually got to overcome both those two things. And then even then, the NFL might just be like, yo, dude, we don't have girls here. That's all good. This is what we're talking about on what kind of choices are you actually allowed to make. And that's just like in the private sector, right? The choices that we make individually. What's that mean from a bigger picture, from a law standpoint? That's his deal. Now, the second thing that I found so fascinating is what he creates is almost the vicious cycle of stereotypes. And this is my words, not his, so you'll sound silly in class if you happen to be reading this for class. But it's this idea that there is a reason why you do want to identify with a group, even though as an individual you should be trying to, self-actualize yourself outside of all the stereotypes. And that has to do with something as simple as this. If you fail to take statistics off a group because they're failing to actually identify themselves as a group, then you cannot measure, watch, monitor, or otherwise have any corrective measures for society in trying to stop the behaviors that are so discriminatory to that group. It's super fascinating as a concept. Had not thought about that. Now, the last thing that he talks about that is really fascinating is the concept of culture versus the concept of law. And both actually do need to work together. He's early. There's other people that have written subsequent stuff to this. But his point is this. It doesn't matter what the law says. If the culture says something else, not a darn thing is going to change. And you got to kind of address both at the same times. Now, he's from Africa. He's writing about female marriages where it's just, there's no consent to marriage. They just are forced into marriage due to family reasons, due to money, all these different things. And even if you create a law that says we must get consent, written consent that the woman agrees to the marriage, not a lick of anything is going to change because that's just not how change happens. It's really brilliant because he doesn't actually give any kind of prescription in this book, and I think that's why he gets some criticism. Speed reading stats, this book was 358 pages. It took me 1 hour and 15 minutes to read. If you'd like to learn more about speed reading, feel free to comment below. Otherwise, thank you for liking, sharing, listening, commenting, and otherwise supporting this. Thank you to the New York Public Library for having books on e-reader this winter. It's been wonderful, and I will see you tomorrow.